Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of our Thrive in China Roundtable. For those of you that are not familiar with our roundtable, these are weekly um, uh, webinars, if you will, presentations, if you will, on the current trends around corporate administration, both in Hong Kong and in China. Every week we delve into a different administrative pain point. Prior to the Easter vacations, we were talking about VAT invoicing and other aspects. Today, we are going to be talking about trademark registrations and what you need to think about in terms of keeping your brand alive and maintaining that brand and monitoring it whilst you're doing business in both Hong Kong and China. Before we start today's presentation, just a very brief intro into who we are. At Woodburn Accountants and Advisors, we are one of the most trusted business setup and corporate administration advisory firms. We are headquartered in Hong Kong with our subsidiary in Shanghai. We specialize in all forms of corporate administration and maintenance of companies within the two territories of Hong Kong as well as mainland China. The services that we offer is everything, again, from trademark registration, employer of record, through the generic administration services like accounting, tax, payroll, corporate governance, standard operating procedure guidelines, recruitment, etc. Just a little bit about myself. My name's Christina Kohler-Palucha. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. I've been doing my job for over almost 21 years now, specialized in the mainland Chinese market, but also touching on Hong Kong. If you want to connect to me on WeChat, there's my QR code. Feel free to scan it and just go ahead and connect with me. As I said, my focus has been the mainland Chinese territory in terms of helping clients in all phases of their growth strategies, all the way from business advisory through to implementation and then growth and scale. Today's topic, we're talking about brand resilience. And I talk about this topic quite often. It does touch my heart. We got our trademark back in 2008, I want to say, or 7, hijacked from us because we didn't put it on the priority list for us to actually register our trademarks. So this topic is important to me because it is a very simple administrative measure that can be very easily done, doesn't cost an arm and a leg, and it is a way of safeguarding what you are doing in terms of your marketing activities, your actual service offerings, or even the trade of goods and services in both China and in Hong Kong. I have put Hong Kong here as well. Some of you may only be doing business in China, or alternatively, you may only be doing business in Hong Kong. For me, the two come hand in hand. Somehow, there always is going to be a spillover. Whether you are just doing business in China, potentially you might have a distributor or a client that pops up in Hong Kong that you are servicing there. It is important to think of both jurisdictions. Again, in my mind, they do come hand in hand. And when you are safeguarding your brand, you do have to consider them as two separate jurisdictions. So very simply, I do want to touch on intellectual property protection strategies. I am not a patent expert. I'm not touching on patents today. If you do have a product that has a specific technical design, do reach out to a patent advisor who specializes also in your sector and industry. That will be very important to think about patent registrations. That is a whole other ballgame, all right? In terms of what I want to talk today, it is really about the brand assets that you are utilizing, whether they are logos, whether it is mottos, whether it is words that you are utilizing to promote your services. Even very simply, a service agreement that has your logo on it that is a brand asset that you are utilizing in the Hong Kong or Chinese market. So when you are looking at all of your, or even if you are sending out an email, you have Chinese staff sitting in China and the email signature has a logo or a motto or a word mark or something to that effect, that needs to all be registered within the Chinese market. Okay, so what I'm going again really through the basics. So for me, this question here is vital because I went through it myself. Every brand has a value, right? Every logo has a value. Every company name that you utilize has a value. And the question I always ask people is, how much is your brand worth to you in the Chinese and Hong Kong market? And when I say worth, I'm not talking only about the monetary value. I'm also talking about the time needed to take action if somebody takes your brand, which is what happened in my case. It had nothing to do with the monetary value. It had to do with the fact that we made a strategic decision when our brand was taken to not purchase it off the hijacker, but to rebrand. And the amount of time needed to rebrand websites, marketing documents, service agreements, business cards. I mean, everything that you could imagine that needed to be rebranded. And it was an exercise that took roughly 3 to 6 months. So that is time. It's time out of your business, or it's somebody's time out of the business, not focusing on what is critical to the company and the needs of the company at that time. Maybe before we start, I'll just explain a little bit what happened to me. We never took this as a serious thing, even though we were advising on it. Back in those days, people were only talking about trademark registrations and the idea that if you are selling products into China, you should be registering your trademarks. Nobody was talking about service companies or even companies that were purely just manufacturing in China and not selling but exporting immediately. Nobody was talking about the importance of registering your brand assets in this case. Lo and behold, it was an administrative function that we didn't take seriously, kind of lazy about it. And eventually we got to doing it in 2008. And I kid you not, 14 days prior to our submission, a random bloke in the middle of God knows where, China, registered our brand asset. And I'll never forget, it was May 1st, public holiday. I'm sitting on my sofa and I get an email from this brand owner providing me with a cease and desist letter of utilizing our logos and our word marks throughout China. Obviously, on that day, I couldn't call my lawyer. Everybody was on vacation for the public holidays. And May 2nd, the panic started building. What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Our fear at that time, there are a couple of options you could do. At that time, our fear and the trend really was that these brand hijackers or infringers were going around registering these brands for a monetary reason, and the expectation was that they would sell us back the logo or the word mark for about a starting point of about 1 million RMB, which we didn't want to pay. Now you have obviously in your bucket of options a decision to make whether you're willing to spend that money or not. We were not. We thought it would be a lot cheaper, which it was, to just rebrand. So that is the methodology that we took. We did go back and forth with them, tried to take it to court, realized there was no point because the rules are very clear. It's a first to file principle. And so we rebranded. I have another client where they are a very well-known consumer brand, meaning they make all types of equipment, raclette machines, toasters, manicure equipment, and they manufacture predominantly in the Chinese market. And for 100% for export. They have about 100 or so suppliers in China. And obviously, when they are producing their designs in China on the toaster, for example, they'll have their logo on it, right? As do many other brands. They had a falling out with one supplier who actually went off and registered the trademark in China, as well as with the Customs Bureau. And that's where then there was a halt. When suppliers were trying to export these products, the products were kept at customs and could not be shipped. There was a tremendous court case of registration in bad faith. Proof had to be shown. Court case did take about 3 months, which basically meant goods couldn't be shipped for about 3 months. Doesn't seem like a long time, but I can tell you when you go through it, every day seems really long. What they did do was on certain equipment that didn't have their brand name on it, or packaging that didn't have on their brand name on it, those items were being shipped out because they were nameless, right? They were brandless. So this is why this topic is really important for me. I've seen the pain. I've gone through the pain myself, but I've also seen my clients go through the pain as well. Anybody that is doing business in China, whether it is just simply you're showing up at a trade show, or you're communicating with people in China, or you have a team in China, you should be registering your brand assets and making sure they are registered in the right classes, and that you have the renewal dates filed in your calendars for updates. Now, what is a trademark? Basically, a trademark, I think it's always easier for me to show you proper examples. I've used Woodburn as an example. We have a logo, which is the circle, WB. We've got the Woodburn Accountants and Advisors, which is the word mark. And then we've got the two that are joined together. And when we do our marketing, even when we have certain service agreements, the majority of the time, the two are put together. Alternatively, they are registered separately. We have done 3 registrations, 3 brand assets to give us the flexibility of how to use them. In Hong Kong, easy peasy, all easy and done. In China, for example, our WB logo, unfortunately, we could not register for the main reasons that Warner Brothers Studios has a very similar logo as us and has registered in our classes, preventing us from being able to register. This does not mean that we can't use our logo in China, unless, of course, Warner Brothers Studios contacts us and says, sends us a cease and desist letter, which we are not expecting to happen because our industries are completely different. If Warner Brothers Studios starts going into the accounting business, then we will have to get rid of our logo. For us, you have to think about what is your priority. Our priority has always been the name Woodburn. Logos can come and go. What's critical is Woodburn. That is who we are, and that's how we want to maintain ourselves, and that is registered in China. So you kind of have to see what the situation is. We definitely recommend doing a trademark search prior to formally registering. We had one client who, because of the length of time it takes, at about the 6-month period was told they couldn't register that full logo and had to restart the application. Better to do a trademark search to know where you stand, what are your chances of success, who else might be in there. We knew that Warner Brothers Studios was there. We still tried to file the application. We got a letter saying that we could not, so it's formalized and it's in the system. Just securing our place there. We've also made a note that when Warner Brothers Studios mark goes up for validity and has to be renewed, we will try and apply again at that time in the classes that we are in. I have no interest to compete with Warner Brothers Studios. I just want it in the classes that are important for us. So why should you be registering your trademarks in China? Who should be registering it? Anybody that is doing business in China and Hong Kong. And again, I have put the 2 territories together. I always think that they come together. There is always going to be a spillover. I want to highlight one of these spillovers. You could be collaborating with a Chinese company and the owner has a bank account in Hong Kong. That is a spillover. And again, it's just a matter of protection. We're talking about a couple $100 US for registration. Just cross your T's, dot your I's, and make sure that it's all done, okay? It also does not matter whether you have an entity or not in China. This client of ours, they had a Hong Kong company, no entity in China, but they had 100 suppliers in China producing their products. Again, that's a spillover, right? And whatever spillover there is, you need to actually be registering your marks. Now, I also want to highlight, my presentation today is on Hong Kong and China. These tips are for global, okay? Trademark registrations and trademark searches are something that you need to do in any territory where you are planning on doing business, okay? It is fundamental, it is critical. I do a lot of marketing initiatives in the UK. We've registered our trademark in the UK. Again, in the classes that we are working in. So even though I'm just doing marketing, I don't have an entity in the UK, but I do a lot of marketing initiatives, speaking events, I have registered myself there in terms of our trademarks. So when I know this is China and Hong Kong specific, and we'll be talking about specifics related to that, but trademarks are a global phenomenon, and in whatever territory you're doing business, you should be registering there. Now, specifically for China, I wanted to highlight the various steps that you need to do in order to register your marks and to show you how easy it actually is, okay? The first thing that you do is you figure out what brand assets you're using in the territory, all right? What brand assets are you using in China? What brand assets are you using in Hong Kong? Are they the same? Are they not? Maybe even think about prioritizing what is fundamental to be registered, okay? The next step is understanding what classes and subclasses are you going to register your brand assets under. How to figure that out is understand what products and services you're going to be offering in those areas. There are 45 classes. The first, 20 or so, 25 or so are related to various products. The remaining are related to various services. If you are not familiar with the class and subclass system, so I'll give you an example. One class might be garments. The subclasses would be sweaters, t-shirts, pants, and different materials associated with that, okay? So it's really understanding also in the subclasses what is for you specifically. If you don't know how to get started on that, I would hope that at least in your home jurisdiction, you have registered your trademarks. You can look at what classes and subclasses there are there. The classes and subclass systems, although there might be minor differentials in terms of how you word certain things, is pretty much unified globally. So you can just really copy and paste or add additional things. And again, remember what activities you're going to be doing in China, what activities you're going to be doing in Hong Kong. Once you know what brand assets you're going to register, once you know what classes and subclasses, the next step is doing a search, all right? In those classes and subclasses, whether there are any brand assets that are identical to yours or similar to yours. If they are identical, then potentially somebody has already taken your brand asset and registered it. So it's important to understand who that is, how long has it been registered, and whether you can reach out to them to obtain it back. If they are very similar, you have to see how many are very similar. So when I, for example, was looking at our logo, I was mentioning Warner Brothers Studios has actually registered it. I say Warner Brothers Studios because it's the most well-known, but actually there are about 5 or 6 that all have this WB circle, kind of in a funky different way, but relatively similar, and potentially also in other colors. That made it very difficult for us to be the 7th one coming in. There were too many similar ones. Now, again, it does not mean that we can't use it. We just have to analyze who has registered, what actually is their company profile, are they different from us or not, to understand whether we can use that circle or not. We have found that we can use it. And even if somebody were to come, we're not worried. But it also gives us security that nobody else can come in and register it either. Because we've got denied, other people will be denied as well. All right. Now, when you do your search, there is never a guarantee that somebody can tell you you are 100% secure in being able to register. I say this because I went through it myself. We did a trademark search back in the day. And because the guy had registered 14 days prior to us, it wasn't up in the system for us to see that somebody was registering it. So just keep that in mind, that there's never really a full guarantee, but there is a chance of success that can be offered. You've got a, I don't know, 80% chance of success, 50% chance of success. We don't think you have any chance whatsoever. All right. Once you know your chances of success, you can also make a decision whether you're going to register or not. Now, in our situation, we decided to spend the money and register our circle anyway, just to have the application filed, and that we had a piece of paper from the China Trademark Office highlighting that we trialed, but we failed. Okay. That was sort of just an additional security for us. We knew we weren't going to be successful. It's up to you to decide whether you want to take that step or not. Okay. For us, a couple $100 US, we just wanted that paper. When you are registering with the China Trademark Office or the Trademark Office in Hong Kong, it's a pretty straightforward application. Nothing complicated at all. Let me stay here for a moment. So these are the 5 steps that you have to do. And again, this is really only administrative, guys, and should not take long, especially if you are a already well-established company. Okay. These are also the steps that you would have to do in any other territory around the world. Okay. If you need any assistance with the classes or subclass categories, you can reach out to us. What we tell our clients to do is provide us with a bullet point of the activities that you're going to be doing in China, the products you're going to be buying or selling, or the services that you're going to be buying or selling. Okay. And obviously you want to have you want to be as thorough as possible and include as much as possible. Now, I have recommend doing the trademark search. I almost think it should be mandatory. However, I do want to all let you know that doing a trademark search is not required by anybody. It's up to you whether you want to do it or not. Okay. Now, if you have somebody who has hijacked, infringed on your trademark, on your brand assets, if they have not used that brand asset for 3 consecutive years, it means that it can be subject to cancellation, can then be considered inactive, and you can then apply to get that spot. However, you need to show proof that for 3 consecutive years, that mark, that brand asset has never been utilized. Okay. It is very rare that the CTMO office or the Hong Kong Trade Office will do that work for you. They'll probably do a quick check or a monitoring check, but it's really you that has to provide that examination. Now, the problem in China specifically is that it is a first file system, which means that absolutely anybody can take your brand asset and register it. Okay. And that's predominantly the disadvantage of China for you, for those of you that have not done it yet. For those of you that have already done it, well done you beat the system. What we have seen with a lot of new brands coming into life is that when you start, let's say you're a UK cosmetics brand, and I'm using this because this is a real life story. Imagine you're a UK cosmetics brand, you have invented your products, they come out into the market in the UK, and the media starts talking about you. Then you have a random Chinese person doing a holiday into the UK, starts reading magazine articles, advertisements, all about this new cosmetics brand. And he's like, you know what? I'm just going to register that in China. Because at some point they're going to want to go over there. They then go online, do a very simple check in the CTMO office system, and they go ahead, hire a company to then register that mark. There are people out there, and especially in the domain realm, who do this on a day-to-day business. In fact, they've created a personal business out of it by registering domain names so that they can sell them later on. This is a type of business in China where people are doing a first-to-file system so that they can be reached at a later stage to be able to sell that logo, that word mark, or whatever else it might be. Now, in this case of our UK cosmetics client, very interesting story. It was a random woman who registered the mark. The goal was to buy it off. And in the end, she didn't agree on the pricing and eventually also disappeared. Meaning no emails were answered, no phone calls were being answered, no letters were being returned, even from her lawyer. And that happens in China. People just disappear. So the only solution around it right now is to wait for the 3-year mark cancellation. There has been a monitoring that's been occurring to see whether the actual brand assets have been utilized. They are not on any of the e-commerce platforms, also not in retail. So we feel quite confident that we can apply for a cancellation in May of this year. Would have been 3 years. But you have to imagine that for this brand, it has meant 3 years of delay in getting into market. Okay. When you register your mark, it is valid for up to 10 years. There is a renewal process that we recommend doing. I am very conservative in my calendar. It is 6 months prior to expiration date because I want to start that conversation and communication 6 months prior to make sure we are really getting it done. All right. And generally speaking, when you are registering a mark in China, I've put here a minimum of 12 to 18 months. In the last couple of years, it's actually gone much faster. It's about 9 to 12 months now in China. In Hong Kong, it's very quick. It's about 6 to 8 months for the whole process to be completed. So I have mentioned to you the disadvantages. If you're not quick enough to get your brand assets registered, somebody else can take it. And basically what it means is you are locked out of China. Even if you're not even sure that somebody else has taken it, you can easily get that cease and desist letter the minute you start doing some form of activity in China. I just had a point that I wanted to highlight and now I've forgotten it. First to file, somebody else can take it. Locked out of market. Oh, I've lost my train of thought. Apologies. I'm sure it'll come back to me. But I do want people, again, to be aware. Oh, no, I do know what point I wanted to say. You might be in a phase right now in your China journey, or sorry, in your global expansion, where you say, I'm a UK, US, Canadian brand. And okay, you know, my first market that I'm going to go to is into the US or into the EU. And I'm going to do all my trademark registrations for there because that's my phase 1. China is kind of 5, maybe 6, maybe 10 years down the line. That does not mean, if it's still in your pipeline, that just means that this is fundamental to protect it, that you're not locked out of market in 5 to 10 years. Okay? So I want people to be aware that this is such an administrative step that needs to be done really straight away. All right. We are planning on expanding within Southeast Asia. Our trademarks are registered. Right. I'm vocalizing it because the work has been done. Even though we're not ready to launch or anything like that, trademarks were already done about a few years ago, just to be sure. Right. So even though you are planning on expansion and you're moving around, please make sure that you are thinking of trademarks before anything else. Navigating the landscape of trademarks in China. Like I said, there are hijackers and there are squatters. There is a different definition for both. Ultimately, these are bad people who are taking your brand assets. Ultimately, you can have hijackers who register the trademark, but their intention is actually to utilize those brand assets on inferior products or services that you're planning on selling. And as soon as you enter the market, they will sue you for infringement. Okay? So hijackers are definitely bad. Those are the people you definitely want to avoid. The squatters are those that are just registering it in order to be able to then sell it at a higher value later on. Okay? Now, I do want to highlight that the Chinese government is fully aware of these types of people. They are also fully aware of stories like my client whose supplier registered their trademarks in bad faith, right? Because they lost face when they lost their contract. They know that this is happening. They also know that on the various e-commerce platforms, there are suppliers out there that are selling the products online with the brand assets of the original product developers, right? So I, for example, had another client who does baby wraps, and they have a logo, they have a design, etc. And their suppliers were taking the wraps, the baby wraps that were not properly done. There were kind of design faults or threading issues and things like that. They would just sell those on the e-commerce platforms with the same brand, but just at a really discounted price because they had defects and faults on them. The e-commerce platform, so let me first talk about the courts and the administration in China. In China, there are specific government courts now that are only for IP-related issues. There are 3 main courts in Guangzhou, in Shanghai, and in Beijing that handle disputes. And they are getting more in favor of the original brands, particularly if proof can be found of squatting and of hijacking. If you are working with e-commerce platforms, the e-commerce platforms have to follow a law, a regulation now, that when you open a flagship store, you are required to show your trademark licensing for China. Otherwise, they will not open the store for you. So again, if you're not a first to filer, you are having an issue, okay? Because they will follow just the Chinese regulations, but they do want to see your trademark license or that it's at least in process, okay? So these are the bad blokes. And like I said, the government is trying to block these squatters, these hijackers. There is now also a database that is highlighting these bad guys in there because you'll find that many of them have registered multiple brand assets, not just one. It's not always so easy because a lot of time they're individuals, like I said, that can run away, or they will set up a shell company that you never really understand who the owner is and register them. So it is difficult, right? We're talking about over 1 billion people that you kind of have to track. What I do want people to take away from this, because this is, again, something that was such a misperception from our part back in the day, is that if somebody has already registered your brand assets in China or in Hong Kong, then it is illegal for you to be offering your services or trading your goods or manufacturing your goods with those brand assets on them. Okay? It is really, really important that you realize this. If you are manufacturing goods in China that have your brand assets on them and somebody in China has registered that, that brand owner can call the police to seize your goods and consider them as counterfeit. So it's kind of like the reverse psychology. So again, it is so important to realize the importance of doing this. Now, in my previous life, my old company used to be called Kohler Group. Similar to the story about Warner Brothers, when we were registering our trademark back in the day, when we rebranded to Kohler Group, we had an issue that Kohler Toilets was registered in one of our classes. which was the accounting and providing professional services class. So I want people to be aware that although Kohler Toilets registered, and because it's Kohler, even though there's the E missing, we still got denied registration. But it doesn't stop us from continuing to provide our services in those classes. So I do want to highlight that there are, don't give up just because somebody else has taken it. Look at the profile of that company. They're a sanitary ware company. They have nothing to do with accounting and taxing and corporation, unless they obviously want to go into that sector industry. Then we'll have to change something. But that's such a rare issue. So it's happened to us twice. One with our WB logo with Warner Brothers Studios, but it also happened with our old company in terms of Kohler Toilets registering in one of our classes as well. Okay, so just because I couldn't register my trademark doesn't mean I still can't use my logo and market myself in China. But this is the homework that you have to do to understand what you can and what you cannot do. Now, again, for me, Hong Kong comes hand in hand with China. It was very funny. I was talking to a food and beverage brand the other day. They are all ready and set to go in China. Registrations are done in China. They're about to sign on agreements with distributors. And I did a very, very quick check and noticed that they had not registered in Hong Kong. And I highlighted that to them in the call. And I said, you do realize that when you're doing business in China, you are going to be dealing with a distributor that might have a Hong Kong office, or a distributor that has a bank account in Hong Kong. There's going to be constant spillover. Even if you just keep inventory in Hong Kong with your brand name on it, there is going to be an issue that somebody could register it, and then you have issues keeping your inventory there. So again, I always put these two countries hand in hand. Please do remember to do your research for Hong Kong. I know it's a tiny, tiny island, but it could prevent you from growing your business at a later stage. Make sure that foundation is there, that you can grow without thinking at all about trademark registrations, and it's just done. The registration of the Hong Kong company, the registration of the trademarks in Hong Kong is really straightforward, even simpler than China. And again, you just have to sign a power of attorney, and that's it. It's so easy. Now, enforcement and compliance. The registration procedures, like I said, very simple. The only thing you have to do is sign a power of attorney to let somebody locally go to the trademark office to submit your files. Okay? We generally have a questionnaire that you have to complete, highlighting who's going to be the owner of that trademark, what classes and subclasses you want to register in. We need soft copies of the JPEG formats if you have that. Also, if you want to register your colored marks, what are the color codes? So our color red, for example, is B5121D. What are your color codes? That you're actually registering in the right color codes as well. You need a copy of whoever is the owner. So if the owner is a company, we need the business license. If the owner is an individual, we need a passport copy. And then you submit. In Hong Kong, it takes between 6 to 9 months. Currently in China, it's around 9 to 12 months. I've put here 15 months. I'm just being conservative. They register thousands of trademarks on a daily basis. And in that time frame is also the 3 months of publication that needs to happen as well. The 3 months of publication means that somebody can come and say, no, you're not allowed to register. And that's included in them. It might also take, the online system might say that you are registered and everything's been approved, but it takes an additional month for them to issue you the original certificate. So I've calculated all of that with the 9 to 15 months time frame. But Hong Kong is way faster than China in that regard. Now, I want to talk about post-registration compliance, because this is really critical, especially for those of you that are dealing in products. Services, a little bit tricky to monitor that. I certainly don't monitor it. I'll tell you a funny story. Just let me go back a couple of slides with our old company. So if you see our old company, we had this little box with the Chinese symbol of Zhong, represents China. We did have a competitor who copied this box, made the navy blue white and the Zhong red. Because we had not registered that logo, didn't mean anything to it. They had not registered it either. So you basically had two companies out there in the corporate services sector using the same logo, same box dimensions, and everything. It was just one was navy blue and one was red. Sometimes you just have to live with that. But it was good for us to be aware of it, to know it. We did have clients point it out to us. So, when you are in the service sector, you just have to be aware of that. Hard to monitor them. In terms of products, the issue for me is counterfeit or infringing goods, right? And I think that would be the issue for anybody else out there. If you look at Louis Vuitton, Prada, Burberry, any of these luxury brands, they are continuously monitoring for counterfeit or infringing goods. Okay. Now, if you see that a company is infringing or counterfeiting your goods, first of all, you should contact the police. The police will do a raid. So they'll do a background check on the company. They'll want to see where you found out about them. They will probably do an investigation, and then they can do even a raid to the warehouse or the manufacturing facility. On sites like Taobao, or even through your own Chinese websites, you can use Ali Protect to protect your IP ownership. But I do want to highlight that there are companies out there who can also monitor, okay, and who do continuous monitoring of websites in China, websites in Hong Kong, e-commerce platforms, etc. They have algorithms and software that is continuously detecting whether your brand assets, your logos, your word marks are being used somewhere. Okay? Even Nike has a monitoring system to monitor Just Do It, their registered mottos. Okay? This is something that I highly recommend investing in and budgeting for to make sure that nobody is impacting the image that you are developing within the Chinese and Hong Kong market. Okay? I have seen a lot of smaller and medium-sized brands be deterred from doing this because of the cost that it would affect them. I agree with them to some level because probably, they're not generating enough revenue to warrant this. But I think it is really good to just monitor and know what is happening in the market as your brand grows and develops and you gain a bigger image. I also say this if you're using KOLs, right? Monitoring the whole online space to know whether people are using your brand or talking about you. It's important to be able to monitor for that. And there are companies that are specialized in this. So just to finish off today, obviously the action plan is, if you haven't done so already, please do think about registering your brand assets. Please do think about doing that as soon as possible. And I just want to highlight, do that in every territory that you're actually working in, okay? What I want people to know is that I want you to be able to sleep at night, okay? Because I did not sleep for about 3 to 6 months when it happened. And I can tell you, when I got that cease and desist letter, I was speechless. You can't even imagine the sensation that I had. And funnily enough, I just want to also highlight, I was listening, I'm a big fan of podcasts. I was listening to Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO, and he was interviewing a very well-known UK fashion brand. I forget the name now, where they had trademark issues even in the EU as a whole. And they had to actually buy out their brand assets. This happens to large companies. This happens to everybody, right? And they didn't do it because they thought they could get away with it until finally they got a cease and desist letter. And it took them 2 years. And the guy was actually saying, I really resonated with him. He didn't sleep for 2 years. I only didn't sleep for 6 months. This is something that is so critical for the growth and expansion of your business on a global scale, not just for China and Hong Kong. So I say you should do this because you do want to protect your identity, right? How you're marketing yourself, your image, your logos, your name, right? You also want to successfully expand your operations without having to worry about your brand assets, okay? You also want to be considered as a trusted entity. And I say that, especially for those of you that are in the product realm, okay? There are a lot of consumers out there who do check whether you are registered. Maybe they are checking themselves because they want to register it, but they are checking the background of you in China. Probably less so in Hong Kong, but more so in China. You also want to seize on certain competitive advantages, right? Get ahead of the marketplace, even if China is or Hong Kong is not on your radar for the time being, right? Get ahead of the game, just get it done. And then capitalize on the worth of your intellectual property. Now, I say this from an accounting perspective. When you do have finally an entity in China and you are generating income, and your goal is ultimately to not keep that income in China, but you actually want to repatriate it back to your home jurisdiction. One of the simplest repatriation methods is through trademark licensing agreements. So and I'm going to use the UK as an example, if your UK company owns the brand assets in China or owns the brand assets in Hong Kong, implementing a trademark licensing agreement between those two entities, it is the simplest and potentially one of the fastest ways of getting your money out of China. And you can decide on how that agreement is worked up. It can be a percentage of sales. It can be a fixed fee, however you want to word that licensing agreement. But it is a way of repatriating capital out of the market. If you don't get your trademarks registered, you completely lose out on this type of repatriation strategy. All right. So I know that's more of a longer term vision, but it's all kind of rolled into one. And I do want people to be aware of that advantage eventually. I do have companies who ask me whether, if they do set up an entity in China, whether that entity should be holding the brand assets, the intellectual property. I answer it in two ways. One, I don't recommend it because my goal has always been repatriation out of China. Of course, there are some moments you want to keep capital in China for further investment within the territory, but ultimately you're looking to get money out. And there are tax advantages of getting that money out before declaring profits tax. However, if you are in an area of high technology and R&D, then in order to benefit from certain tax policies, you do need your Chinese entity to hold that IP. But again, that's not the generic norm for everybody. So again, in order to be able to advise, we really need to understand what your goals and objectives are in the market. Some people do ask me, does it make sense that Hong Kong holds the trademarks for China? That's totally up to you. It depends on where you want that money to flow. In the past, you used to be able to do it that your Hong Kong company would own the trademarks, but you actually would repatriate the funds in the UK and the bank and the tax bureaus would never check anything. Times have certainly changed on that. It all has to link up. So whoever owns the trademark is the one that issues the invoice for the trademark licensing fees, and then you pay to that entity. So it does have to match up. You do have to provide supporting documents in those cases. You do have to provide your trademark certification to show proof of who is the owner. So let me just make sure that's the end. That's the end of today's presentation. So far, no questions have popped in. If you do have questions, now is the time to insert them. Or you can raise your hand and I can unmute you. Otherwise, you can just put your questions in the chat box. If you are looking to get started, I will provide you with a link to the recording today. and also to a link to my diary, and we can set up a call in regards to getting you started and getting your trademarks registered if you haven't done so. Happy to provide you with a quotation on that. And if you are interested in joining our Thrive in China WeChat community, this is my QR code. You can connect with me, type in Thrive in China, and I'll connect you to our community. We've got about 200 odd, more than 200 people on there, all doing business in China, all different industries and sectors. It's a great avenue if you guys have questions on best practices or tips. You can insert your questions in there and people will just respond to you, not just me, but others as well. We've got real estate agents in there. We've got marketing professionals in there, a whole bunch of different service providers as well that will provide additional added value to what you're looking to do. So just connect in that way. Next week, we're going to talk about the EOR advantage in China, especially for those of you that are not looking to set up an entity yet. Then 8th of May, we're talking about Asia direct sales. So how you can use Hong Kong to expand into the Southeast Asian or Asian region. And then on the 15th of May, we're going to be talking about offshore tax exemption in Hong Kong. All of our roundtables are up on our YouTube channel. So if you have not had a chance to review our recordings since January, a whole bunch of topics in there already. The most popular one so far has been the VAT invoicing one and the updates on digitalized e-files. They're all up there. You can review at your own time and see them. There's still no questions that have come up, so I guess I will leave you there. I wish you all a great day. Take care.